The city streets bustled with life as the evening sun cast a golden glow over the towering buildings. Cars honked in the distance, street vendors called out their deals, and pedestrians moved in a steady stream, their faces a mix of determination and distraction. Amid this chaos, a young boy sat quietly on the edge of a worn park bench, clutching a crumpled dollar bill in his hand. Liam was only 12, but life had already taught him the value of a single dollar. His shoes were scuffed, his jacket too thin for the crisp air, and his stomach growled softly, a reminder that it had been hours since his last meal. Yet his hazel eyes held a spark of resilience, a determination to keep going even when the odds were stacked against him. Today, this dollar wasn't just money, it was a lifeline. He could use it to buy a small sandwich or a hot drink to keep warm as the night approached. But as he sat there, debating how to make the most of it, a figure shuffled into his line of sight. An older man, his face lined with weariness and his clothes tattered, stood near the corner. His hand trembled as he held up a cardboard sign that read, "Hungry. Any help appreciated." The man's eyes met Liam's briefly, and in that fleeting moment, Liam saw more than just hunger. He saw despair, the kind that spoke of long nights on cold streets and days spent invisible to the world. Liam's heart ached. He looked down at the dollar in his hand, the edges frayed from being folded and unfolded too many times. He thought about the gnawing emptiness in his own stomach, but then he thought about the man's sign, about the possibility of easing someone else's pain, even if only for a moment. What would you do if this was your last dollar? Would you keep it for yourself, knowing how much you needed it? Or would you give it away to help someone else, hoping that kindness might come back to you someday? Liam made his decision. He stood up, the dollar clutched tightly in his hand, and walked toward the man. His small voice cut through the noise of the street. "Here," he said, holding out the bill. "I don't have much, but maybe this can help." The man's eyes widened in surprise, his weathered hands trembling as he reached out to accept the offering. Thank you," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Thank you so much." Liam smiled faintly and turned to walk away, his empty hand slipping into his pocket. He didn't know what would happen next, but in that moment, he felt a strange sense of peace, as if he'd done the right thing, even at a cost to himself. Unbeknownst to Liam, his small act of kindness had set something extraordinary into motion. In the minutes that followed, his life would take a turn he never could have expected. Liam sat on the bench, the cool metal pressing against him as he clutched the crumpled dollar in his hand. His stomach rumbled softly, a constant reminder of the gnawing hunger he had grown used to ignoring. He had spent the day wandering the streets, looking for odd jobs or any opportunity to earn a little extra, but luck hadn't been on his side. He stared at the dollar, the only thing standing between him and a small meal that could carry him through the night. A sandwich, a warm drink, even a packet of crackers would feel like a feast right now. But as he weighed his options, his gaze wandered back to the man on the corner. The old beggar sat with his cardboard sign, his shoulders hunched against the chill, his hands trembling as he held out an empty cup. Liam looked down at his own thin jacket, the frayed hem barely holding together. He knew what it felt like to have so little, to be invisible to the world. But he also knew he wasn't the only one struggling. The man on the corner looked like he hadn't eaten in days. His hollow eyes told a story of hardship Liam couldn't even begin to imagine. His heart twisted with indecision. The dollar in his hand was everything he had, but he couldn't shake the thought of how much it could mean to someone else. What if this dollar could give the man a chance to feel human again? Even for a moment. Liam thought, but what about me? What if I need it tomorrow? The boy glanced at the bakery across the street, the smell of freshly baked bread wafting toward him. He could practically taste the warm, crusty rolls. His stomach growled again, louder this time, urging him to take care of himself. Yet, every time he turned his eyes away from the man, guilt pricked at his conscience. How could he sit there and eat while someone else suffered even more than he did? He thought of his mom's words, spoken years ago when they still had a home and she was still around. Uh, Liam, no matter how little we have, there's always someone who has less. Kindness costs nothing, but it can mean everything. And uh, the memory tightened his chest. This dollar wasn't much, but maybe it was enough to bring a little relief to someone who needed it more. Maybe it could be the kind of kindness his mom used to talk about. But was it foolish to give away the only thing he had? He closed his eyes, his grip tightening around the bill. What would you do? He wondered, as if asking the universe, or perhaps someone watching over him, for guidance. Would you keep it for yourself, knowing how much you needed it? Or would you take a leap of faith and give it away, hoping that kindness might come back someday? Minutes passed as Liam sat there, torn between his needs and his desire to help. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on his small shoulders. He glanced again at the man, who now sat slumped over, his head bowed as if he had given up entirely. Liam felt his throat tighten, and if I don't help him, who will? Taking a deep breath, he stood up. His steps were hesitant at first, but with each one, his resolve grew stronger. As he approached the man, Liam's heart raced. He felt the dollar burning in his hand, a symbol of his sacrifice and his hope. Here, he said softly, holding out the crumpled bill. The man looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, he didn't move, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. This is for me? The man asked, his voice shaky. Liam nodded. I don't have much, but I hope this helps. The man's hand trembled as he took the dollar. Tears welled in his eyes and his voice cracked as he said, Thank you. Thank you so much. You don't know what this means to me. Liam managed a small smile, though his stomach churned with hunger. As he turned to walk away, he felt lighter somehow, as if he had done something that mattered. But what would you have done in his place? Would you have held on to that last dollar, knowing how much you needed it? Or would you have taken a chance, trusting that a little kindness could make a big difference? As Liam walked back to the bench, he couldn't help but wonder what the rest of the day would hold. He had no idea that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. As Liam walked back to his bench, the cold wind seemed to cut a little deeper now that his pocket was empty. He sank onto the seat, wrapping his thin jacket tighter around himself. He glanced back at the man on the corner, who now held the dollar in his hands as though it were a treasure. The old beggar wiped his eyes and looked toward the sky, whispering something Liam couldn't hear. For a fleeting moment, Liam felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature, a sense of fulfillment, as if he had made a tiny dent in the universe's cruelty. But reality crept back quickly. His stomach growled again, louder this time, and the bakery's enticing aroma taunted him. He sighed, leaning back against the bench and closing his eyes, trying to push the hunger out of his mind. Unbeknownst to him, someone had been watching. A sharply dressed man in his late 40s stood a few feet away, leaning casually against a lamppost. He had seen the entire interaction, the boy sitting alone with his dollar, the hesitation before he approached the beggar, and the final act of kindness. The man's eyes lingered on Liam, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. After a few moments, the man walked over to Liam, his leather shoes tapping softly against the pavement. Liam opened his eyes, startled by the sudden presence. "Hi there," the man said with a kind smile. "I couldn't help but notice what you just did." Liam blinked, unsure how to respond. I just thought he needed it more than I did," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. Uh, Liam gently pointed out, the way he was standing there all still. "That's a rare thing these days," the man replied, his tone sincere. "Giving away the last of what you have." Most people wouldn't do that. Liam shrugged, unsure where this conversation was going. It's just felt like the right thing to do. The man chuckled softly, pulling a sleek wallet from his coat pocket. Do you believe in karma? He asked, his eyes twinkling. That sometimes, when you put good out into the world, it finds a way back to you? Liam hesitated, not knowing what to say. He had heard the word before, but wasn't sure if he truly believed in it. I don't know, he admitted. I just hoped it might help him. Liam hesitated. I just hoped it might help him. If he does. The man nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. Well, sometimes one good deed can change everything, he said. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $50 bill. And sometimes the universe sends a little thank you. Liam's eyes widened as the man extended the bill toward him. Wait, what? I can't take that, Liam stammered, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. And you can, the man insisted, his voice gentle but firm. And you should. I've been around long enough to know when someone deserves a break. Consider this a small reward for your kindness. Liam hesitated, his hand trembling as he reached for the bill. Thank you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But why would you do this? And the man smiled again, his expression warm. Because kindness has a way of rippling outward. And today, you reminded me of that. As the man walked away, Liam stared at the bill in his hand, disbelief and gratitude swirling within him. He thought about the dollar he had given away and the hope it had brought to the beggar. Now, with 50 times that amount in his hand, he couldn't help but wonder, was this karma? Or just a coincidence? What do you think? Do you believe in karma? Could a single act of kindness really set off a chain reaction that changes everything? Liam's journey wasn't over yet. This was only the beginning of a day full of unexpected surprises. As Liam sat on the bench, the crisp $50 bill in his hand felt almost surreal. For a boy who had spent months counting every penny, this was more money than he had seen in weeks. His mind raced with possibilities. He could buy food, get a warm drink, or even save some for the difficult days ahead. But before he could fully process the moment, a voice broke through his thoughts. "Excuse me, young man," said the beggar, who now stood before him. His frail frame looked slightly steadier, his eyes no longer clouded with despair. In his hand, he clutched the dollar bill Liam had given him. Can I sit down?" Liam nodded.